You don't need to be worried about the elbows up movement taking over because ever since Carney has been elected, his elbows have been so far down that I'm not even sure that we have elbows anymore.
Have a good weekend and elbows down if you support Canadian entrepreneurs.
Welcome back to yet another episode of Zillennial Money. I know we've been away for a few weeks due to some scheduling conflicts and this and that, but we are back, and this is episode 63, I think. And yeah, we have a loaded docket and we have a loaded guest kind of panel today. So it'll be a nice full show for you guys tonight. So let's not waste any more time and jump right into it. So the first story we were going to cover, a lot of these stories we were going to cover last week. So apologies if they're a little bit stale, but I think they're still relatively relevant to today's climate. The first story of tonight is Elon Musk and his America Party. So as we know, we discussed the big kind of divorce between Elon and Trump over the past, that unfolded over the past month or so. And then after this big divorce, Elon's kind of, lost faith, been disillusioned with the Republican Party. He was supportive of the Democrats before. So back in 2020, he endorsed Biden for president because he didn't like Trump. But then he liked Trump and then decided to endorse Trump for 2024. But then now he doesn't like Trump either. But he's not going back to the Democrats because he's like pissed off every Democrat under the sun by this point. But then now he's also, falling out with the Republicans. So he's like, you know what? These parties, they're all the same. Like the Democrats, Republicans, they're what he calls the uniparty. And he's trying to change that, right? So he's starting this party called the America Party. Now, I'm not fully up to date on the details of this. Actually, I heard that there was like a filing or something that he registered it with the the people who put like names on the ballots and stuff, like the organization, that the federal agency that does that. But then I heard that was actually fake news and he hasn't registered anything yet. So I'm not sure if any of you have updates on that. But in any case, he is trying to start this third party movement, that's for sure. And this is in response to a lot of things. Lately there's a bunch of controversy around the Epstein files, which is like actually pissed off a lot of Trump's base. Like the MAGA people are super mad at Trump for kind of flip-flopping on releasing the Epstein files, because this was one of the things that Trump campaigned on, and then now he's part of the cover-up, quote unquote. And even before the Epstein files thing, there was the one big beautiful bill, which was the main thing that led to kind of the divorce between Elon Musk and Trump, where Elon really hated the one big beautiful bill and said it was full of wasteful spending, full of pork, as people called it. Pork is like political speak for wasteful spending in American politics language. So yeah, basically Elon's America Party will be founded on the basis of non-reckless spending, like balancing the budget, all the stuff that like Elon was saying that Trump was supposed to do, but kind of didn't and went back on his promises on, and transparency on stuff like the Epstein files and stuff, right? Like if Elon was in charge, which he's actually not eligible to run for president, by the way, because he was born in South Africa, and you have to be, either born in the United States, or if you're born outside of the United States, you have to like prove that you have American parents and a clear lineage connection to the country. But yeah, which is not what Elon was. If Elon like does mount a challenge, he's going to start with the midterms first and try to get maybe like a handful of congressional seats, and then we'll see about the presidency. But in any case, my question to you guys is, what do you guys think of this idea of the America Party? A lot of people are kind of bashing Elon on this, saying that this will never work. But I've heard a lot of things that people say about Elon, or say about what things that Elon are trying to do that won't work, and then they end up working, right? So never count Elon out. But Elon is saying that, oh, this is going to work because America needs a third option, and everyone always says, America is being controlled by the uniparty, and we need a good third option, and nobody ever votes for the third option. But Elon's maybe trying to change that, and he thinks that it could work. So my question number one is to you guys: do you guys think that this America Party will work? Do you think that they'll be able to get maybe like 5 to 10 congressional seats? And my second question to you guys is, what do you guys think about just kind of the two-party system in general? Do you guys think that there is room for a third party? Like, should he be doing this, or would you rather Elon do something else, not like, focus back on Tesla? Because I know like a lot of us here are Tesla shareholders, and him running the America Party and getting involved in politics, it's arguably not helped the stock, right? So do you guys think that this is a worthwhile thing for Elon to focus on? And yeah, just what are your comments on kind of the America Party in general? Would this be something that you would support in the future potentially, or not? Take it away.
No surprise, I support Elon on this. I don't think you guys would be surprised by my stance on this, but I think that the first thing is like what you just said, Andy. Like a lot of people just always say Elon's gonna fail at what he does, so I think it's kind of dangerous to just generally rule the guy out on a lot of things. Like I find that like when Elon like launches, Elon crashes a lot of rockets because that's like the nature of the rocket industry, and I always find like the media and just generally people that don't like Elon online are always like celebrating his like failures. You see a lot of like media headlines when he launches rockets saying like Elon failed, his rocket failed, and those kinds of headlines just to kind of like point out, like trying to make him look bad in general. And I just think that like what I saw from a lot of people speaking about Doge was basically they just called it a failure. But I think that just doesn't really give credit to the fact that Elon's like a grinder, and that like if he does like fail, as people say, he tends to like come back hard and win. He's like notoriously as a CEO, he's notoriously late on everything, but he pretty much gets all his goals done. So I just think to get started, like you shouldn't. The general like rhetoric I'm hearing online and stuff that his political venture was a failure. I don't think he's done. Um, I think that like I I think that Elon like basically um like he's I kind of lost my train of thought. Sorry, but I just think that like we're at a stage where like Elon went and made a lot of trouble with the Democratic Party in the last few years. I think that like kind of trouble like really peaked when he bought Twitter and like made a major stance against like a lot of Democratic policies. And I think that he basically beat the Democrats. Like he had a huge part in defeating the Democrats decisively and putting them in the position they are today. So I wouldn't like rule out Elon's impact on politics. Like at this stage, the way I look at it, it seems like the neocons in the Republican Party. Like I always like make it clear that I don't really consider like the MAGA 1.0 or 2.0 base like a neocon political movement. And it seems like the neocons in Washington uh, kind of like saw Elon defeat the Democrats, saw Elon kind of have a huge amount of influence over the Trump administration, and I think they won this round. I think that they actually found a way to convince Trump to like it seems like when Elon came out with Doge, the neocons mobilized, and they successfully mobilized. And it seems like Mega wanted, especially Mega 1.0, wanted a few, like several things like immigration, border security and immigration, ICE funding. They wanted tax cuts extended, the Trump tax cuts, and Trump wanted the neocons to remain loyal because the midterm elections are coming up in about a year from now, and he kind of feels like he needs those votes. So like I feel like Trump got what he wanted in terms of his like Mega 1.0 agenda in this budget, and the costs to Mega 2.0 are actually simply that there's no more Elon, there's no more Doge, there's no more Epstein release. I think that the Unit Party really wants to keep that secret. We had an incident where Mega bombed Iran, Trump bombed Iran. We saw a massive increase in the military budget when Trump said he was going to drain the swamp. We were seeing Trump ease up on Ukraine, the language he has about funding Ukraine in this forever war. So I think that's the deal. I think that like in the end, the neocons were successful at asserting their authority over the Republican coalition, and I think that the more libertarian, tech-centric, Elon type MAGA supporters are out of the coalition at this point. That's what it feels like today, at least. And a lot of people are taking this like situation to like say that anybody who voted for Trump was wrong and clearly like things are going in the wrong direction. I don't see it that way. I think these things have a lot of variables at play, and I think that we won a lot with having Trump in power, especially around industrial policy, and I think Elon won a lot. But he didn't get his main goals through, which were Doge. Will the America Party work? Like, I don't believe it'll work in the sense that it will literally take over all U.S. politics, or it'll take over the presidency one day. I don't believe it'll be like a major party, but I do believe, like from a balanced power perspective, it has a solid chance of working. I think a lot of Americans are actually sympathetic towards the kinds of things that the America Party is standing for. I think that in the sense, like Elon kind of represents like like today's like Ross Perot type figure. Like in a way, like when Elon came out with the Twitter files, for example, a lot of people just like dismissed him and said that was a nothing burger, and they said nothing came out of the Twitter files. But in reality, I think the Twitter files significantly changed the conversation that was happening between different voters, and I think it actually made an impact on how like a lot of like centrist Democrats felt about the Democratic Party at the time. So I see Doge as that kind of thing where it's subtle. It's not going to like be successful at all of his goals, but Doge and the American Party are changing the conversation. And it's changing the conversation in a way that the Washington Unit Party doesn't want. So that's where I think it's successful. I feel like they are scared. I feel like in the end, it's probably beneficial for Elon and Trump to kiss and make up and like agree where they agree and not focus too much on where they disagree. But I think the real people who really should be worried about Elon's American Party would be individuals who could potentially be Trump's successors. Because Elon's basically signaled that he's not going to stop. He was willing to fight the Democrats and the Democratic establishment and the far left Democrats, and he went for it and he beat them. And now he's pointing his guns to the neocons in Washington, the forever war people, the military industrial complex people. So like I think he's committed. I don't think he's gonna stop, and I think he's gonna keep pushing this American Party or something close to that agenda until he has some level of success on changing the conversation in Washington. That's kind of where I see it at this point. In terms of the two-party system, I think like ideally, I think it would be a good idea if there was more than one party. I mean, I think a lot of people support a third party or like getting out of the two-party system because a lot of people don't feel represented by the two big parties. Like I think that everything that Washington D.C. represents is against the American people, and I think that like you need some kind of political movement that is anti-Washington, anti-swamp. So I don't know if that happens outside of the two-party system or not, but I think we need to attack the two-party system. And when I say attack the two-party system, I'm talking about the swamp. I'm talking about the DC elites. And I think these people don't represent Americans. They don't care about Americans. They're experts at getting elected. They're experts at like using emotional language to get Americans to vote for them. But they really, for a long time, haven't really represented the interests of individual Americans. So if that means that we need a third party, I support it. If that means that we need to like stage a takeover, if the country needs to stage a takeover of one of the parties, kind of in the way that Elon did at the end of this most recent election, maybe that's the way to do it. Is it bad for Tesla? I guess it's not ideal that the CEO of Tesla is engaged in so much political activity. I don't actually believe that these things have a huge impact on the stock price. I think Tesla's stock price is actually related to earnings per share. And I think Tesla earnings per share hasn't grown for 3 years, and that's why the stock hasn't grown for 3 years. I think the second when earnings per share starts to increase again with Tesla, the stock will increase. And I think it's that simple. I don't think the political action might produce some short-term volatility. I don't think it really produces any significant volatility in the stock when it comes down to it, and I don't think it's going to impact like the long-term goals of Tesla Corporation. I think that Elon's going to meet his goals. So I understand why people don't want their CEO being so active politically and controversial. I get that point of view. I just don't think it's actually that impactful, as a lot of people say it is.
A lot of people are receptive to a more middle ground party between the Democrats and the Republicans. That being said, I think that what they really want is more of a change rather than what we currently have with the two present parties. I think that in a lot of perspectives, they are very similar in the sense of they both have things they're really, really, really not doing so hot on. And it's always a matter of choose the lesser evil, depending on your perspective on which is the lesser evil. So I think that is kind of the big issue with just the way the political sphere is currently set up. I don't think that Elon's America Party will do a fat load of anything. I think that Elon himself has become a very polarizing individual. So him being associated with this, while it may give it some boost, it will not necessarily result in convincing a lot of the people who are not happy with his actions in the past several months. I don't think a lot of them will be convinced that he's now better and he's now a represents a party that they want to be associated with. So I think that means that this party will be unlikely to be able to differentiate itself sufficiently to be a real third option for Americans. So I think it'll basically just fizzle out and do nothing. I don't think that Elon has enough support to sway voters to vote for his party. Regardless, I think that the majority of the supporters will go to one of the established parties already. Either way, he's just and the fact that he can't run himself, it's not even like it's like Elon for president. It's like, I have made party that I will somehow be associated with, but also I might not be associated with. You know, he was a part of the American government for Doge for like 5 minutes in the grand scheme of things. So how long is he even going to be associated with this party? It's basically a nothing burger is kind of my perspective. It's like, this is more of a nothing burger than like the last few times we've had real third party opportunities, which have not happened in a long time. And it requires a very charismatic leader to even remotely challenge the alternatives. And excluding the fact that Elon is, I wouldn't say the most charismatic individual in himself, excluding that fact alone, he can't be the president. So it's not even like he could be the charismatic leader to lead the party. He cannot lead the party functionally, and I wouldn't say that he's charismatic enough to convince people to break the system of red and blue, Republican, Democrat. So I think that's it's basically a nothing burger. This is a blip that will disappear in a few months. So I think he's just being loud and emphasizing his complaints. I don't, and honestly, I just don't think that he's going to spend the amount of time that is necessary to actually make this into something real. It's just going to be a bunch of noise for a few months, and then it's going to move on, and we are not going to hear about it again. So that's kind of my perspective on it all. I think it's a bunch of noise. I don't think it's really going to amount to much of anything.
I guess I'll just do a quick like rebuttal. I mean, I don't think that it necessarily. Again, I'll reiterate that I don't think it necessarily like results in like an actual large third party being active in the United States for like the next like 50 years or anything like that. But I do think that like calling it a nothing burger is very similar to how people called like the Twitter files a nothing burger, and I think the Twitter files are actually like really instrumental in changing a lot of like left wing people's minds, especially in places like the tech elite and stuff. So I just think it's like calling it a nothing burger is just kind of dismissing the fact that Elon is always. People always talk about Elon this way when he tries something, and he usually fails on the first attempt, and generally is somebody that if he's told like he's not going to be able to do it, he's probably going to find a way to have an impact. But again, I'll reiterate, like I do agree that it's not going to be like something where like the America Party literally takes over Congress. Like if that happens, eventually that party would have just become as kind of captured as any other party in the American system. I think in the end, the America Party is only really successful if it like changes the conversation rather than like it's not really important whether it wins elections or not. It's just important whether it changes the conversation. And I think that some things like Twitter files and Elon's entrance into US politics actually had a huge impact on the population. And I think that the MAGA people who are dismissing Elon and Trump's fight as something that's not going to negatively impact MAGA don't really understand the MAGA 2.0 coalition, like the kind of libertarian voters who came to the party in the last election, who would have probably voted for Biden in the election before that. I don't think those MAGA people have totally grasped the fact that Trump kind of messed up pretty badly with this one. That like Elon was much more important to his coalition than he gave it credit. And I think the neocons really wanted Elon out of the way because he wasn't letting them do the nonsense they typically do. So they won this round. Like they successfully influenced Trump to get rid of Elon in that kind of like language in his administration. Because and Trump kind of feels like he needs the Republicans, so he took their side on this one. I think that most people who are saying that this is not going to be like impactful to Trump's legacy and impactful in U.S. politics are, I think like usual, they're just like downplaying Elon when he's down. Like people like to kick the horse when it's down, but it's a horse that always gets up. That's basically my point. Like when Elon does enter like a realm, he usually has a major impact. He doesn't have to win. He just has to have an impact.
I think that he'll make noise. If that's kind of what you're quantifying as like having an impact, maybe he'll have some impact. I don't think that this party is going to ever be really representative of like an actual threat to the two-party system. And part of that is just the fact that the two-party system is extremely hard to break into with a third party. That's just how it's worked for, well, the whole system basically. So like, I just think that it's unlikely. Well, it's extremely unlikely unless the other two parties become so outrageously unpopular that the only choice is to choose the third party. And that is just very unlikely to actually end up happening. They'd have to be there's too many people who are diehard Republicans and diehard Democrats for that to actually change. At least in my opinion. If you're suggesting that it's just that he'll maybe get people talking about it more, I can see that, but like I just don't think that this is really going to do anything more than make a bunch of noise for a little bit, and basically eventually burn out pretty hard. And it's not that like it's not whether or not Elon himself is going to be like being counted out or whatever or anything like that. Like, I just don't think that Elon has the capacity to, or the willingness to spend the amount of time that's necessary to be a politician. in any real capacity. So I mean, and if he does, then you definitely don't want to be sitting there as a Tesla shareholder, you know, trying to keep the stock price up while your CEO's out playing president or, you know, politician. So I don't know.
I mean, I've been watching Teslas. I've been in Tesla since 2015, and people have been arguing that Elon has been distracted since then, and he has made people like me a lot of money. So like people like me kind of understand Elon's game just from that perspective, and I don't think Elon is somebody who's just gonna like get tired of it. I think he's gonna keep going until he has an impact. And just to give you like a previous historical example, like I do believe that Ross Perot successfully broke the two-party system when he almost took out the two parties in a presidential election. And just about 3-4 years after that, the American Congress balanced the budget. In the first time they balanced the budget since the 1950s, and really the only time they balanced the budget. They balanced it for like 5 years or something like that. I think that Ross Perot effectively broke the two-party system in the 1992 election, and that's what led to that outcome. Because the American public demanded that Congress did something about their debt at that moment in time, and I think that that moment, that political moment, is coming for America. And I do believe, I've seen polls in the past that showed. I know the numbers move around, to be clear, but there's been polls in the past that showed that like when Elon like kind of first got into politics, he has become the most popular political figure in America, like vastly more popular than Donald Trump or Joe Biden or whoever else you put him against. He actually is the most popular political figure in America.
Maybe I could just chime in here. And I think another example of maybe a third party that has worked somewhat well in American history. If you look at the 1912 U.S. presidential election, it was between Woodrow Wilson, Theodore Roosevelt, and the Republican incumbent William Howard Taft. And in that election, because remember back then, the Republicans were sort of like the leftist party and the Democrats were the conservatives. This was before they kind of switched sides. But in 1912, there was a big disagreement between Theodore Roosevelt and William Howard Taft, who were, I guess, more similar in ideology compared to Wilson. And then Roosevelt decided to mount a third-party challenge using his progressive bull moose party, he called it. And that he actually won, let me look at it, 27.4% of the popular votes and carried 6 states and 88 electoral votes. And because of like vote splitting and like if you look at the map, it looks like, you know, Wilson won in a landslide, and he did win in a landslide. So it's like, you know, people are like, what are you talking about successful? It's like his opponent won by a landslide. Well, it's like there's vote splitting happening, right? As I said, like Roosevelt was more similar in ideology with the Republicans at the time, even though they had their like kind of disagreements and stuff. But it's like they split the votes in a lot of places where, you know, it would have handed the whole state to Wilson because it was winner take all. And if you combine, you know, the popular vote between the Republicans and the Theodore Roosevelt's Bull Moose Party, it would be a larger percentage than what Wilson got. So, yeah, I mean, there's historical examples of how third parties in America have been somewhat successful. At least it, as you said, Sunil, it changes the conversation, right? Like you don't necessarily have to always like define success as a third party winning an election, because I agree, winning like the entire thing is incredibly difficult. And so far, like nobody has really been able to do it, but it certainly changed the conversation, completely smashes up the political dynamic. And even if like the third party doesn't win, it forces the other two parties to kind of, you know, course correct, right? Because all of a sudden, if you have a third party that wins like almost a third of the vote, then that's gonna change the conversation a lot, right? Tristan,
course correct is I think that's the right wording. It's like it causes a course correction. I like that wording.
For sure. Tristan, you had something you wanted to add?
those are exactly the examples that I was thinking of like instances where third parties have had a larger reaction. And I think we can kind of see some of what I was talking about there with regards to Roosevelt being like, he is like very, very much like textbook, like very charismatic leader who was popular, very popular as himself, rather than like, some other individuals. Like, I don't think that most politicians would have been able to run as their own party the way Roosevelt did and get the amount of votes that he got. So I think that that's kind of like what I'm talking about, where it's like they might be able to make some noise, but I just don't see them. They need to have a leader who is comparable to like one of the greats, to actually have a chance of like becoming a real breaker into of the two-party system, as in like ousting one of the two parties from its place. And it's not impossible, but it's just incredibly unlikely. That's what more so what I was getting at. And I mean, and as I said, like if we're defining success as getting people talking about stuff, then third parties can get people talking about stuff, but they haven't had much success in actually ever forming any government is the kind of mostly what I'm saying.
I think one of the ways the conversation gets framed, actually, like maybe I think that we all are actually potentially framing it wrong, and a lot of people are framing it wrong, where they say like break the two parties. I guess you don't break the two parties in America. They're very much entrenched. But what I think the way you break the parties in America is you force them into realignment. And there in America does get American parties typically have these like 5-decade periods or so, and then they get forced into realignment. So like Andy mentioned the example where there was a point in time where the Democrats were like the conservatives and the Republicans were the left wingers, and it switched at one point. There was a realignment. And I think we're in the middle of a realignment right now. I don't know how it's going to fall, but I think that the way we should be articulating it so it makes a little bit more sense is that, yeah, you're probably not going to break the two parties, but you can force the two parties into realignment.
I don't know if there's a name for this, but I call it the paradox of the two parties, right? If you ask people whether or not there's like stuff that's wrong with both parties, I think 80% of Americans, if you just pick people off the street, right? 80% of Americans, if you ask them like, name a couple of things you don't like about either party, like they could name stuff that they don't like about either party. And like, if you ask them, do you agree with this statement that both parties sucked? I think 80% of Americans would say yes, right? But then you ask them, okay, if both parties suck, do you want to vote for a third party? Like 80%, maybe like you'll get 80% of people say yes, they would, but then they do a completely different thing when they show up at the ballot box, right? Like it's kind of a paradox where everybody says the both parties suck and they want a third option, but then when the third option presents itself, it's like, no, I'm not going to vote for the third party. And it's like, if you ask people why, there's always some excuse. It's like, I don't like Elon specifically, or I don't like Ross Perot, or like, I want a third party, but not that way. It's like, okay, yeah, but like everyone's always screaming about the third party, but no one wants one. And like, there's always some complaints and something always goes wrong at the last minute. Right. So yeah, like people ask me, do you think the America Party is going to succeed? And literally, I have no idea. And this is like one of the first times in my life where I actually have like zero idea on like how the outcome is going to be. Because on one hand, as you said, Sunil, like a lot of people doubted Elon on many of the things that he said he was going to do. And he ended up doing things that people thought were impossible. So on one hand, when you have somebody like Elon who's promising to shake up the American political system, yeah, like if it's Elon, it's gonna work, right? But then you have the paradox of the two parties on the other hand, and it's just like it's a mess, right? And actually, I think maybe like this is an unpopular opinion. This is a final thing I'll add before we move on to the next story. I Let me defend like the two-party system a little, because I know everybody says the two-party system sucks, but I actually think that there's quite a bit of redeeming qualities to the two-party system. Because if you look at countries like Israel, for example, right? If you know anything about the Israeli political system, is made up of like, you know, tens or even like, I don't know, over like 100 maybe. There's a lot of different small parties in Israel, right? And then a lot of them get seats as well. So it's not just like parties that always like campaign and goes nowhere. No, like the small parties get seats. So then you have like, they call it the cassette or something like that, the Israeli parliament, right? They they always have like these weird coalitions between a billion different parties, um and it never works, because like the government falls apart, everybody goes back to the polls every like few months, or you get a scenario where like you have all these like parties that just band together that don't really ideologically agree with each other, so like nothing really gets done except they elect like a strongman leader like Netanyahu, who's like, you know, causing all these issues and like attacking everybody and stuff like that. Like, listen, I don't want to get into like the Israeli like Gaza conflict or the Israeli like, you know, Middle Eastern thing, because that's like a whole nother can of worms that we're not going to get into today. But I'm just saying, right, like it's not done Israel any favors by having these like smaller parties. And if you look at less extreme examples, like I brought up Germany earlier because we were having this conversation in our DMs earlier between us. It was like in Germany, they have a lot of smaller parties too. Like the German Green Party actually has a lot of seats, and then they like sometimes are the kingmakers in making like informing a government, right? Like Germany. Former government was called the Traffic Light Coalition because it was the SPD, who's the red, and then you have the Green Party, and then you have the kind of middle, like more so, I guess, economic libertarians who are the yellow, and then it didn't work really well because they didn't agree on too much stuff. My point is that it's like having a bunch of small parties form your government is not necessarily a good idea either. So, you know, there's got to be some balancing points, right? But I don't know who raised their hand.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I do agree with you that empirical evidence shows that countries that have like multiple parties don't necessarily have better governance. Um, and the last thing I'll say that like that people aren't pointing out right now is that like Elon owns X or Twitter. That was like hugely impactful in his like political war against the Democratic Party. Like he won that war. Just a little bit of recent history. Like Elon's first attempt at putting the thumb on the scale was actually Biden's midterm elections, and then the Democrats won that election. Elon was very disappointed that his influence wasn't impactful, and then he bought Twitter, and then things changed. So that's something to pay attention to, is how Elon uses his like extremely effective media asset to put the thumb on the scale. And this is where people should be scared. And I do believe the Trump administration is kind of scared about what Elon's going to do. In the end, I actually think that Elon's not going to, like, the American Party is not going to influence the presidential elections. I think that Elon and Trump will probably actually find common ground soon and make up. It's actually my prediction. They'll probably make up.
So if everyone's ready, let's move on to the second story of tonight, which hopefully we'll have a lot more to talk about regarding this, which is Bitcoin all-time highs. So last week, Bitcoin hit an all-time high of $123,000, and I think it was just over that. So 123 something. Who's counting the pocket change at this point? Couple $100 here and there, but yeah, since then it's come down a bit. It's corrected, so it went down to 116K one time, and then it bounced back up to 120, and then I just checked earlier today, it's come back down a little. So right now it's just under 118K. It's like 117,800, something like that. at the time of this show. So it's bouncing around all over the place, and yeah, it's just if you look at the like M2 chart, which I should have got one on the docket. Apologies, I didn't get the chance to, but like just take my word for it. If you look at the M2 chart, it's still kind of lining up, although it's diverging a little bit. So like all the people that were promoting the M2 theory, are they right or are they wrong? Like they're kind of right, but they're kind of wrong as well. So like if you go strictly according to the M2 that was like delayed by 108 days or something, or some people do like 90 something days, but whatever, like we're supposed to be at like 130k already if you go according to that, but we're not. But you know, people say maybe like 120k ish is not that far off, and we're still roughly in line with the M2. And if we keep on following the trend, maybe by this time next month, we'll be at like 140k or 150k or something like that, right? So a lot of opinions. Some people are saying that like, oh, it can't be that easy. Like M2 is it's just one measure, but then there's a whole bunch of other factors that we can't see. And then it's just like Bitcoin's going to do what Bitcoin's going to do. And then there's a bunch of other people that are like, no, I still believe in M2. It's going to happen 150k by the end of August, blah, blah, blah. Right. So lots of opinions here. So yeah, I'm just curious to hear what you guys have to think about the Bitcoin price action. Do you guys think that like we're topping out? Because like we kind of hit like 120 and then now we're like just hovering around there and correcting and like not really pumping anymore. But then again, it's only been like a week or so, so like maybe the time frame is too small. Do you guys think that Bitcoin has more room to run from now till the end of this year, or are you guys taking profits, or kind of what's your plan for Bitcoin and kind of Bitcoin related investments going forward?
I'm very happy that we hit a new all-time high. I generally think that these M2 models work only because Bitcoin is related to global liquidity, being a risk asset and everything. So even with like, yeah, there's always a little bit of divergence from that M2 model, but it's still in line. Even after like Bitcoin was supposed to spike with M2, which we kind of saw it did. It's supposed to like spike down, which we're now seeing like a consolidation zone. So I consider what we're seeing today like a consolidation. In terms of like how high we go, I think I was a little bit more bullish coming into this cycle, thinking we would hit like 300 to 400k. So maybe I'm thinking now we probably top out at like 200k. I think that I've read a lot of theories that like because Bitcoin is now a $2 trillion asset, it is not going to follow a typical risk asset liquidity cycle like it has been, where Bitcoin now is a big enough asset that it might follow a different like volatility pattern. So like what we're seeing right now is these like step ups. So my actual hope is that like we don't have a blow off the top and Bitcoin's price action is much more managed in the next 5 or 10 years, where we see this much more managed rise, like let's say 30% a year for 10 years would be very nice. So that's kind of like there's like a part of me that hopes that we don't have a blow off the top and we just have this like very smooth scheduled rise, and Bitcoin is no longer an extremely volatile asset because it's a $2 trillion asset. But there is a part of me that wants one more blow off the top because it's going to be really good for my my MSTR trades. Personally, I'm getting really close to being in a position where I'm going to close out my short-term trades at MSTR. I own some MSTU and MSTX that I'd like to flip back into Bitcoin near term. I think this earlier in the week when we spiked to 123, I felt like I was days away from being able to close my trades and to kind of sit back for the rest of the year. But maybe it'll be this summer, I'm hoping. I'm thinking, regardless of what happens by the end of August, I'm just going to take my profits probably on all my short-term positions. I have no plans on selling any Bitcoin or any MSTR shares for the rest of the cycle, though. And I plan on hopefully having some kind of blow off the top event that allows me to do that swiftly in the next few weeks. But overall, I'm happy with the price action. I expect us to see us somewhere close to 150 by the end of the summer. And if that happens, then I'm going to be in a very good position to just enjoy the rest of the bull market into 2026.
Yeah, I'm definitely leaning towards, can we have another blow off the top real quick? That would be great. Currently, I think I'm in a kind of a holding pattern. I stocked up on a lot of Bitcoin related options, call options, etc., in preparation for the upcoming moves up that are all reasonably up nicely. So if we can get a nice upwards move a little bit, that would be pretty swell. I think that we're still going to be relatively tracking the M2, but mostly just because there's more money in the mix. And I think that if the Fed starts cutting rates again, we'll probably get a big boost to Bitcoin's value at that point. That being said, it'll be difficult to, time it perfectly. So I think that I'm kind of on board with Sunil's kind of perspective to start taking some profits out as we go up here, probably starting in August or so. I'll probably be closing out some positions, particularly some of the more risky ones, and maybe some of the options that are kind of in the money already, and that kind of thing. I'll probably keep holding on to those. I'm kind of expecting that we're going to have a bit more of a boost up. I don't think that we're done right this second. I don't think 123 is the peak. I think we've probably got at least another 20 grand kicking around in the booster seat, but we'll have to see how it plays out. So at this point, I'm trying to reduce positions in more risky stuff, such as the Bitcoin miners. I don't think that is going to be where I want to have a lot of capital floating around in the short run, just because if Bitcoin starts declining for real, those stocks are going to get slaughtered. And I'm not looking to repeat December, where I got pretty hardcore murdered. So that being said, if they blow off the top, that would be great too. No problems there. But we'll have to kind of see how it all pans out. I know that just because December was brutal doesn't mean that we won't have a blow off the top. But I think that I have had my eyes opened and a pretty firm reminder on getting too excited about options and kind of getting too euphoric, where you're like, yeah, we're making so much money, like what can go wrong? And you keep buying options, and you, instead of taking profits out, you keep going and going and going. So I'm going to be trying to be a lot more controlled on my taking profits and moving money from some of these more riskier assets, such as like the options, and moving them into less risky assets as we go. So we'll see how this pans out. I think that the next, I would say, until pretty much October, September, that's when I think that we should be seeing a pretty big move upwards, like in the next 3 months, kind of leading up to that time frame. But we won't really find out the peak. And since the evaluation of Bitcoin is so high now in terms of actual dollar amounts that need to be spent to move it upwards, we do need a lot more money coming into the pot to get us those big gains. So we're going to see a leveling off of during this cycle, at the very least. I would say we're not going to be seeing I could see us hitting 200, 300%, not percent, 200, 300,000, if we're getting pretty crazy, but I don't think we're hitting 1 million this cycle. Right. So I think that we'll see. And that's just because of the sheer amount of money that needs to go into the mix. So That being said, if it does start going that direction, I will be very happy, but we'll kind of play it by ear.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I'm not challenging that idea. Like if you look at it, and it's like if Bitcoin needs to go from a 2 trillion to 3 trillion, that's a lot of money that needs to come into Bitcoin to make it go that high. But then I question, like I've been around to see Tesla like hit $1 trillion, and then like 4 weeks later is at $2 trillion, and been like, what the hell happened there? Like, so if we get that blow off the top that we all really want secretly, even though we would like to see Bitcoin become less volatile, but we secretly want one more blow off the top. We all know that's true. It's the impact of those short squeezes that really gets us there. So like if a short squeeze brings us to like $800,000, we're going down hard eventually. But it would be fun to see it. And I think it's possible just on the mechanics of a short squeeze it could happen. Where you have this situation where everybody's forced to buy Bitcoin to cover their short. But then if Bitcoin literally moved up $1 trillion this cycle, that's telling me it's about to come down in some pretty hardcore downward volatility. And that's where, like, if you're holding any risky, like Bitcoin type plays, like get out. That like, if this thing goes past 500,000, like get out. It's a short squeeze. It's a structural move in the market. It's coming down again, so just get out of that point. That's my only advice to people.
Yeah, like the blow off the top thing is like it's like a Fast and Furious movie, right? Like they always say that one last ride, but it's not the last ride, and there's always one more ride coming. So hopefully, like, what is this? This is like the fourth cycle, I guess. So like Fast and Furious 4. Hopefully we get one last ride again, and then this is gonna be the last ride for real, guys. And then of course it happens again next time. Like I'm just saying, right? Every 4 years, somebody says this cycle is different, and it's never different. And I'm hearing that like a lot this cycle, because this cycle has been a little bit different, leading up to kind of where we are now in the cycle. In terms of the price action, where like Bitcoin has been kind of muted, and there's no, like, if you look at the Google Trends, there's not really like that much retail interest. I've been hearing a lot about like how this cycle is truly different and stuff, but in the back of my head, I'm like, is it really different? Like, I don't know. Well, I guess we're gonna find out in the next 6 months or so, right? If this cycle is truly different. Like, I'm still like of the opinion that it's not truly different. Like we're gonna see a blow off top. As to how high the blow off top goes, I think it's gonna go higher than 200K. Like 200K is like it would be like maybe the staircase pattern, like you said, Sunil. Like I don't know. I think like the Josh Mandel prediction 444K. I think that's a good target to get to in a blow off top scenario, and that's kind of, I don't want to say that that's my base case, but like I wouldn't be surprised if that was what was happening. And then you also have people like Samson Mao, who's like still sticking by his calls, saying that $1 million Bitcoin is still possible in 2025. He specifically said 2025, 1 million. So that's like if things really get crazy, like let's say the U.S. government passes that bill that requires them to buy up to 1 million Bitcoin. I've heard some rumors and conflicting information about how much Bitcoin the U.S. government actually has. So there was like a journalist that found that they only had like 30,000 Bitcoin left, where they sold the rest. But then there was like other evidence that like was like, no, the U.S. government still has around 200,000. So I'm not sure who to believe at this point. If they do only have 30,000 Bitcoin left, that's actually like, I feel like the more bullish scenario, because that would mean that the price action that we've seen in 2024, it was because the Biden administration was selling, which would actually be a good explanation as to why kind of the price action was like, kind of muted this cycle in general. And then also, if they only have 30,000 left, they need to like at least buy back like the 170K that they need to get to the 200K, right? Or if the if the Cynthia Lummis bill passed, then that would require the U.S. government to buy up to 1 million Bitcoin, which they would have to buy like 900 something thousand Bitcoin, and then that would probably send Bitcoin to $1 million each if the U.S. government all of a sudden needed to buy 900,000 Bitcoin, right? But like, I don't know, like this bill, like Congress moves at the speed of molasses. I know they were pretty quick with the Genius Act and the Clarity Act, which were just signed today, by the way. But with the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Act, I feel like they might need some more time on that. So I don't necessarily see that pass in 2025. But if it does happen within the next few months, there's a chance it could, right? Next month, maybe we'll be sitting back here with the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Act, the Cynthia Lummis version passing, and then the U.S. is required to buy like hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin goes to 1 million. Who knows, right? But yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts.
There's a part of my brain that wants Bitcoin to just become a mature asset, and then there is like the other part of my brain that wants the biggest blow off the top we've ever seen, so that I could just cash out and relax for the rest of the year. So we'll see.
Oh, you'll be relaxing for more than the rest of the year. You'll be relaxing for the rest of your life. Like if it does go to like 500K to 1 million in that, like anywhere in that range, like I'm sure that if it actually went to that range, like it'll probably be enough for any of us here to just retire, right?
Yeah, well, I think that like if Bitcoin goes over 500,000, then I think that like MSTR goes to $5,000 a share or more. That's my view on that, which is going to be really nice for me.
Yeah, if you look at the MSTR chart, it's already kind of exponential. If you put it onto like a long enough time frame, it's been described as the biggest comeback of all time because they did have a blow off the top in like 1999, I think, which was burst by the dot-com bubble, right? Like it was a dot-com bubble, and the stock fell like 90 something percent, like 98% or something like that, and people thought that like MSTR was just dead, and then Saylor came back with this genius Bitcoin play, and then now it's gone to all-time highs, and it's an absolutely insane comeback that Michael Saylor engineered through Bitcoin. And he was the first to kind of come up with this strategy. That's why he renamed the company Strategy. But anyways, that's a conversation for maybe another day. If we are ready, let's move on to our final story of tonight, which is the Trump tariffs. So Trump has threatened, or this time he's saying it's for reals, no more taco, no more Trump chickening out. This is for reals this time. Starting August 1st, Canada is going to be hit with 35% tariffs just across the board, along with some like sectorial tariffs, which I think he already implemented tariffs on Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum, I think copper as well. There's a new tariff on copper, but this is like separate from all of that. So like it's going to be in addition to all of that if it's in a specific sector, but it's just 35% across the board for Canada August 1st. And if you hear Prime Minister Mark Carney talk about this, he sounds pretty pessimistic. He sounds almost, I'll say, like depressed about it when the media is asking him about it, because like from his tone, what I gathered is that it seems like there's not really a way for Canada to avoid these 35% tariffs. It's kind of like, Canada's like, at least according to Carney, he's of the mindset that like Canada's given all the concessions that we can, and like Trump's not willing to negotiate, and we're going to be hit with 35% tariffs. So good luck, everybody. And that's at least the kind of tone that I got from our prime minister. But who's really kind of the unreasonable one here, right? Because according to Trump, Canada's being the unreasonable one. He's always saying that Canada's harder to negotiate with than China, which, like Trump has kind of a framework deal in place with China right now. He signed a deal with Indonesia the other day. He signed a deal with the UK already. I think the India deal is happening soon, if not already. There's like stuff that's like being negotiated with Japan and South Korea, which are also apparently two countries that are hard to negotiate with. But like Trump is like picking on Canada specifically, saying that like we're even harder to like deal with than the EU, than like Japan, than China, than a bunch of other countries. So like according to Trump, it's because Canada puts all these like crazy dairy tariffs. So there's like 200% tariffs, up to 400%. He said in his letter on dairy, which Canadians have like rebuffed that by saying that no, like it's only 400%. If you go above a certain quota, it's not 400% across the board. But still, like there are scenarios where like the tariffs that we impose on the U.S. Get so high that it's essentially impossible for the U.S. to sell dairy to Canada. So like that's an example of that Trump gave of an unreasonable trade policy that Canada has imposed on the US. So, like there's a lot of like kind of back and forth. And I know that we're Canadians here, so we're going to be a little bit biased, but try to, at least, I guess my recommendation is try to approach this topic as objectively as possible. Like at first, at least, don't put yourself in the shoes of like a Canadian who's being affected by this, but just like put yourself in the shoes of like a third party who's maybe trying to like be a arbiter, or just somebody on the side that's like judging this situation. Who is being the unreasonable one here? Do you think like Trump has some merits by saying that Canada is being unreasonable towards the US, or is Trump just like a crazy guy who's like trying to bully everyone and he's the one being unreasonable? It's like a lot of back and forth, right? So wondering what you guys' opinions are on this. And lastly, let me just kind of present a picture of Mark Carney kind of looking the 1,000-yard stare into the abyss. So kind of like a World War One like esque. They just need to make this black and white, and it could be from World War One. He's like looking into the distance, looking kind of depressed, and talking about the like Canadian steel industry's survival. So basically, I think she's the industry minister now, like Melanie Joly. She used to be the foreign minister, but she's now in charge of like kind of protecting the steel industry and aluminum industry. And Joly basically said that, yeah, without government intervention, like the Canadian steel industry is just going to fold, which is not encouraging coming from like the head of the industry, like your industry minister, which is like part of the the highest ranking position in the government that's responsible for dealing with all this stuff, right? So basically, like they're saying that the Canadian government is saying that the steel industry is going to really need help as soon as this kind of 35% tariff thing is going to like go into place on top of what's already been implemented on the steel industry, right? So yeah, it's Canada's probably not in a good place right now. And yeah, my question to you guys is, again, first, who is the unreasonable one? Are there merits to both sides, or is Trump being just like completely unreasonable? Number two, do you think that this will actually unfold? Because we still have, a couple of weeks until August 1st. There's still a chance that we could negotiate a deal and arrive at something before the deadline. Do you think that we're gonna, be able to negotiate something with Trump before the August 1st deadline? And what do you think the future of Canada-US trade relations is going to look like? And what are the future kind of just country relationship between the US and Canada in general is going to look like? So lots of uncertainty, lots of questions.
I think that like assessing who's being more unreasonable, I mean, nobody's really being reasonable. Like, I wouldn't, even if I say I'm a Trump fan, I wouldn't like come on here and like claim that Trump's like a reasonable guy. Like, he's not. Like, I know everybody knows his personality traits. Like, Trump is Trump. Uh, in terms of like one perspective from the Canadian side that has to be said is that like we renegotiated NAFTA a few years ago, like under Trump's administration. So that is like a rebuttal that Canadian like politicians that are saying that does have weight. Like we renegotiated this thing. What else do you want from us? So that's like the Canadian side of it, where I do think we do have a strong argument. And like, yeah, Trump's not being reasonable because he's putting 35, 50, 60, 100% tariffs on other countries. That's not reasonable. So you can't like come at this and say Trump is reasonable. Now, again, like, is the 35% tariff going to happen? I think Trump's kind of like, kind of uses this as a tactic, and he pulls back like 5 seconds before the tariffs are supposed to be implemented. So no, I don't think it's going to be a 35% blanket tariff on Canadian products. How is it going to land? I don't know. Like, it's becoming an old, tiring news story at this point. Now, on the other side of it, and I think this is going to piss off, I think this is going to make a lot of our viewers call me unpatriotic, but I honestly think my take is actually more patriotic. I think the Canadian economy is, for the most part, very unreasonable on things like the way we protect our cartels. We protect our supply management, which is like things like dairy and poultry. Like that doesn't just protect farmers, as a lot of people try to say. It protects our corporate players in that cartel system, like big giant Canadian corporations who sell food to Canadians, who are prevented from competing with producers out of America. I do think that the way we set up cartels in our country is very unreasonable. I think the bank cartel is extremely unreasonable. I think it's extremely unreasonable that that from the American perspective, or even like a European perspective, that nobody can compete in Canada's banking sector. There's a lot of countries in the world that let foreign banks compete in their countries. A lot of like prosperous, successful countries do this. So I don't think I don't think there's actually a very strong cartel for Canada to have a banking cartel. And like another example is our telecom cartel. So my view on it is that I think one of the worst things can happen to Canada is for the elbows up agenda to be successful. I think it's going to be really bad for Canada, actually. I think that elbows up is Canada solidifying our like degrowth mentality on a lot of things, which has impacted our resource sector. It's impacted our tech sector. I think that this mentality is killing the Canadian economy. It's destroying the ability for innovators in our economy to be successful. I think that like supply management on dairy is often like framed as something, well, we're only protecting Canadian farmers. Well, you're also making like impoverished Canadians pay higher prices for food staples than any other G7 country in the world, and many other OECD countries. We have the highest prices for things like cheese and milk and yogurt, which are food staples. These are healthy products that people should be consuming according to their doctors. And we're making the poorest Canadians pay like more than double that what other countries pay for those products. So I don't think that supply management is this thing that like protects Canadians. It protects some Canadians, often corporate conglomerates, and it allows those individuals to continue to gouge Canadians by preventing them from seeing competition from other countries, which would probably serve us well. I think the bank cartel is another example where it hurts our fintech industry. Because if American fintech can't compete in Canada, then Canadian fintech can't compete in America, and that's as simple as it is. There's a lot of Canadian small fintech companies that could be very impactful in the U.S. market. The U.S. banking market is really interesting because there's a lot of small regional banks and small players in the United States that do very well, and there's a lot of medium-sized and small Canadian banks that could very easily be players in their regional small markets. We can easily have a company like ShakePay or a company like what do you call it? Neo Financial be successful in some U.S. markets. Like ShakePay and Neo Financial don't need to be the most successful crypto exchange. It just needs to be one of the top 10 most successful exchanges in America for it to be a business opportunity for Canadian technology and fintech talent. But because of our bank cartel and because of the way we protect them through our trade agreements, our Canadians don't have access to that market. Canadians can't sell to Americans, and they can't sell to us, and that's how it works. But the problem here that people don't understand is that this is the kind of like thing that creates brain drain, because like talented Canadian engineers don't need to work in Canada. They speak English, they can go in the US, they have skills, and we do see a lot of brain drain when it comes to like a lot of our engineering talent and stuff. Because we don't like this kind of action, having an economy run off of cartels that protect our corporations and allow our corporations to gouge Canadians and like forcing like staple products like milk, but even cell phones to be more expensive in Canada than most other OECD countries is not good for Canada. Like elbows up should be defeated if you want Canada to be a successful country in the future. If you want Canada to be a successful country in the world of innovation, you want elbows up to be defeated. An example where elbows up was recently defeated was that Mark Carney was trying to use this trade agreement to impose a digital sales tax on Canadians. It would have impacted Canadian prices for those products. And then Trump, luckily, was there to save Canadians from experiencing higher prices for tech products. So I know this is a controversial stance. I know there's a lot of people, Canadians, that just want to hear patriotism and just want to hear people like me supporting Canadian conglomerates and Canadian cartels, but I don't support Canadian cartels. I think they should all go die. I think that I support Canadian consumers. I support Canadian as on the individual level. And I think on the individual level, these cartels hurt Canadians more than Trump hurts Canadians.
You don't need to be worried about the elbows up movement taking over, because ever since Carney has been elected, his elbows have been so far down that I'm not even sure that we have elbows anymore. Yeah, Tristan, I'll let you talk before I chime in.
There's a lot of complexities to this one for how Canadian and American trade kind of fits together. I think it's pretty clear from my perspective that there is no way to view this as Trump being reasonable in the sense of like the level of tariffs that he's suggesting is just like they're absurdly high. It's not like he's like, "Ooh, I'm gonna slap a 2% tariff on your stuff, and you're gonna have to deal with it." It's 35, 50%. He's just throwing around huge numbers all the time. So I don't think that. I think that if it was a lower number, I feel like maybe I could understand more so the logic behind it, but it just feels to me like the intention is more to gouge external trade more than actually like improve anything in the US. So like that's kind of how I kind of view the way he's kind of going about this. That being said, there are issues with the way we do trade between Canada and the US. Like obviously there's different rules that apply to different industries. It's not been fully free trade, but it has been relatively free trade, things considered. I understand that, like, for example, like supply management with the dairy industry is not ideal. It's not a great system. But the problem with getting rid of the system is that it's so entrenched at this point that you will essentially be bankrupting a significant portion of the dairy farmer population because of the fact that the way they've set it up, they've essentially created an asset class called quota that farmers have to buy, and farmers often buy it on debt, which means that if you get rid of the quota factor, which directs supply chain management, now I have an asset that has gone from worth potentially millions of dollars that is now functionally worthless. So because of the way that they've set it up, and also just to be clear, quota represents a significant amount of government revenue. So it's not like they are incentivized to get rid of this for the good of our cost pricing, etc. Like there's no government incentives for them to get rid of quota. So because of that fact, they're not going to get rid of it. So it's just going to be how do they manage this this change without pissing the US off more. But I think a large factor on that is also that I think a lot of this is just an excuse, because like at the end of the day, yes, is there the potential for high tariffs on American dairy, for example? Yes. Is much actually being tariffed at that? No. Essentially, none of it is being tariffed at that. It's being used as kind of more of a limiting the amount of American dairy that is entering Canada, which we can have a debate on whether or not that is a good strategy or not. But it's like essentially it's like you hit a wall at a certain point of imports. That's all the imports that are allowed to come in. Like it's like essentially nothing. And then once it hits that peak amount that they've decided, I don't know how they've come up with the decision, but they've decided that this is the amount that we can allow in. That's when you have your 200-300% tariffs. That basically is like a big teller to the management, like the dairy farmers in the States, like, time to stop exporting to Canada for this next little bit.
No, but don't you think that that's the unfair? Like, I think that's what Trump is mad about, right? Like, it's not the fact that we're charging them like 400% tariffs, because like I agree, no one's paying for it, but no one's paying for it because it's like it's essentially a soft ban, basically, right? Like it's not a explicit ban, but it's a practical ban. It's like if you go to a buffet and they say that like you can only consume 3 plates of food, and then your 4th plate is going to be $100 extra, and the buffet is only $30 per person. So it's like it's essentially a ban. That means like if you go to that buffet, then you can only eat 3 plates, because it literally doesn't make sense for you to eat the 4th plate, because it's like you're banned from doing it. Like that's why Trump is mad. It's not necessarily like the rate you said is 400% versus it should be 300% instead of 400%. No, like it's like you banned us from selling dairy to you after a certain point.
Yeah, I would think that the threat of a 400% tariff is fairly ridiculous. It's fairly ridiculous to complain about Trump threatening to charge us 35% tariffs when we're threatening to charge American businesses 400% tariffs. Whether we charge or not, we're still threatening it. It's not reasonable. There's nothing reasonable about the system.
It's essentially just a soft ban, and I think it's 200-ish%, just for reference. It's still absurdly high. It's still high enough that no one's going to pay it. So like, do they have a reason to complain about that? Yes. Is it something that America wouldn't do? No, America would definitely be willing to put on a massive tariff at a certain point to prevent their own industry from being made uncompetitive. Whether they dug the hole that made them uncompetitive or not, the way that Canada has, this is exactly the sort of stuff that America would have been willing to do. So, like, I think that I don't think that this is that crazy in that sense. That being said, I understand the complaint on it, and I think that the difference between the 35% tariff and the theoretical 200% tariff, because no one actually ever pays it, is that the 35% tariff, we're all going to have to pay it, basically. Not like actually Canadians, functioning Americans are going to have to pay it, but like everyone is going to be paying for that tariff. Whereas basically the ban, essentially, it's not even really a tariff. The dairy one, it's basically called, you can't have more U.S. dairy. Like, you're not paying for that prior to the hitting the wall, right? So you're paying essentially no tariff prior to that. So then there's kind of like there's a wall, a peak amount that can go into Canada from the US in terms of dairy, but like everyone is not explicitly paying for that tariff at the time. Whereas with the 35%, everyone has to pay the tariff because it's just blanket, right? You want an American product, you have to pay the tariff. It's not like after a certain amount of American products, you pay the tariff or whatever. Which I think makes it much more difficult to manage. It's basically just an additional tax being placed on the companies and the U.S. people for that, depending on where those tariffs are decided to be gotten the value from. Sorry, Zillennial or someone, did you raise your hand?
Oh, sure. I just wanted to point out one other factor that doesn't really get discussed with supply management is that like people always factor in like supply management prevents Canadian farmers from having to compete with US farmers. But what supply management also does is it prevents new Canadian farmers from entering the industry. So like not only does supply management prevent us from being more competitive with Americans, supply management prevents more competition from happening domestically in Canada. Like you cannot be a dairy farmer unless you're willing to put up millions and millions of dollars for quota. Like if you want to run a farm, you have to put up millions of dollars. If you want to run a farm in, I don't know, Idaho, you don't have to do that. Give Canadians the opportunity to do the jobs they want without putting these stupid barriers in their way. That's kind of my argument on supply management. It's not just about American imports. It's about Canadian producers that can't produce. There's a lot of people who would produce milk in this country if it wasn't for this stupid system.
Yeah, and also to keep that in mind, there's interprovincial trade barriers too. Like, I'm not sure if any of you know about this, but like there's constraints. I don't know like too much details on exactly how it works, but because I just found out that this was a thing like a few months ago when like, you know, it was campaign season and it was during like the election, and you know, all the parties were saying that if we are elected, we're going to eliminate interprovincial trade barriers. I'm like, what are they talking about? Like there's barriers between, you know, trade, especially with stuff like dairy, who's supply managed. Like, you know, like there's controlled tariffs between, like, if you are in Alberta, you can't sell to people in Quebec and Ontario because, like, you know, the Quebecers want to sell it to Ontario. And it's like, you know, it's as you said, Sunil, it's a cartel, right? Like the cartels, they control like the system, and then they're like, oh, you're from another province that's not part of our cartel, you can't sell to our customers because like we typically sell to those customers, and we control this market. Even though you're from the same country, like you're from Alberta, you can't, you know, come into our territory because you're from the West, and you just stay on the West when we're from the East, right? Like there's so much of that stuff going on in Canada too, which again, like as much as I hate to admit it, Trump has highlighted, right? Like Trump has, like, for better or worse, brought this conversation to the forefront. And maybe Canadians should actually, I don't want to say thank Trump because like he's also done a lot of things to hurt Canadians, but like, you know, like he's at least brought up this issue to the forefront now that we're talking about eliminating these interprovincial barriers, which I don't know if Carney is going to do it. I don't have a lot of faith in the Liberals. I'm not such a big fan of the Liberals, in case you guys haven't clued in, but like I don't have a lot of faith that the Liberals are going to do anything to like make the interprovincial trade thing better. But at least this is like a topic of conversation that that is being discussed, right? So yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say on that. In terms of who's being unreasonable, again, I agree with you guys. Like there's things that are both that are unreasonable on both sides, between Trump and the Canadian side. And I just hope that we don't get slapped with the 35% tariff. And there's a deadline coming up next week, 21st or 23rd, I don't remember, but like there's a deadline that like we're supposed to get a deal done by then. So we'll see if a deal gets done by next week. So I hope that it does, and we don't get hit with the 35% tariffs, which will be not good for our Canadian economy, who's already not doing so hot to begin with, if I do say so myself.
I just had one more thing to add, because one of the questions you did ask is like, what's the future of Canadian and American trade? So like, this is another thing that's going to get me people angry at me in the comments. I think that like, I think it's I don't know the number. I don't know if I have the number correct, but it's somewhere around 70% of Canadian exports go to the U.S. I think I'm close to the real number, and I think that like in like 20 years, it'll be somewhere around 70% of Canadian exports will go to the United States. That's what I think the outcome of this will be. I don't think anything's going to change.
Yeah, it's really hard to change your geography, right? Which, and by really hard, I mean you can't, because like we're stuck like on the same continent, and plate tectonics is going to take like millions of years to kick in. So like for the next few million years or so, we're stuck with the United States, or we're stuck attached to them. So unless the US completely falls apart and there's like, you know, no demand from US like anymore because the country fell apart, like we're gonna have to sell to like our biggest neighbor, who's a massive consumer powerhouse, the biggest in the world, in fact. That's like right on our doorstep, right? Like all this stuff about Carney saying that, and this is why like I never liked Carney in the first place, is because like he's always like trying to talk big and saying that, oh, we'll just like go deal with Europe, right? Like we'll sell all our shit to Europe if the US doesn't want to buy it from us and they want to tariff us. It's like, okay, well, Europe is across an ocean, and Europe is also not as big of a consumer base as the United States. And even if we dropped all trade barrier, even if we enter the EU, right? Like, you know, it's going to be hard to get all our stuff like over there. Like we don't have a pipeline that goes across the Atlantic Ocean. So how are you going to sell like, you know, oil and stuff? Like I guess you can put natural gas in a container ship, but then there's only like, I think like a few ports in Germany that could take it. That's like up in the north, and then you're like gonna have to rely on like a few choke points to like, you know, sell all the liquefied natural gas in container ships. Like it could work to an extent. I'm not saying it absolutely like wouldn't work, but I just don't think it's like a credible long-term solution to this problem, right? The credible long-term solution is to negotiate with Trump and just like, you know, he's not going to be president forever. So hopefully whoever comes in after that is easier to deal with than Trump. And in the meantime, you know, just like if Trump gets us to drop our ridiculous dairy supply management stuff and drop our interprovincial trade barriers, that could actually be a win for Canada, right? So, you know, I think that we just got to kind of have to deal with Trump and survive the next 3 years and then figure out a plan from there. That's what I think about Canada-US trade relations, basically. Yeah. All right. So if no one else has anything to add, let me pass it to Tristan for the outro.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channels. And yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.
Have a good one.
Have a good weekend, and elbows down if you support Canadian entrepreneurs.